Hello there viewers, Axel here. Welcome to another Axel Tech video. Today we are taking a look at Ephemeral, a new privacy-focused web browser for Elementary OS developed by Cassidy James Blady. If you're familiar with the Elementary project, you probably know who Cassidy is. He's the co-founder and UX architect of Elementary Incorporated and has done a number of apps for Elementary OS as well. So, in other words, if you're familiar with the Elementary project, you probably know who Cassidy James is. So, let's talk about Ephemeral. Now, there's a lot of web browsers out there. You got things like Firefox, Brave, Epiphany, Chrome, Chromium, all those sorts of things. So, what makes Ephemeral special? Unlike with a lot of other, unlike what you might expect, Ephemeral is actually special because it's simpler than a lot of those other browsers. Ephemeral is always incognito. So with other browsers, you often see options like, let's say in Epiphany, for example, if we go to that, you can open things in a new incognito window or a new private window, as it's said in some browsers. Ephemeral is always in that incognito state. So it mitigates tracking, it doesn't store data on your device or anything, and whenever you close that particular window, all browsing that you've done in that instance of Ephemeral is just gone. That being said, at the same time, if you're on a website that you want to visit in another browser that you, say, do have login information saved on, like, let's say if I go to YouTube, for example, and you can open it in any other browser that you have installed with this button right here. So let's just say I'll open that in Epiphany. And there you go. And similarly, you don't have to close the window entirely to remove all the history. You can also click the trash icon right here. It'll erase browsing history and then open a fresh instance with, well, no browsing history. So let's go over the App Center information a little bit. It's going to cover a lot of things that I already talked about, but in probably better detail than what I went into there. So, as I mentioned, you can easily open an open web page in another installed browser if you're not too worried about things staying privacy focused. It's always incognito. Every window of Ephemeral is a separate instance entirely. There's no third-party cookies, as it blocks those by default, and no telemetry, as it will not touch the network until you explicitly load a web page or perform a search, and even then, no usage data is ever collected. And also uses DuckDuckGo as the default search engine rather than Google to avoid as much tracking as possible. Now, you might be thinking, okay, why should I then use Ephemeral over just opening a page in a private window of another browser? You can do that. You can do that, but in most situations, like, let's go to my Elementary settings here real quick. Applications, default browsers, you can't choose to set the private mode of other browsers as the default that's opened. So if you click on a link somewhere, unless you want to manually like click and drag that to a private moded browser, it's going to open in the normal version of that if you just click on it. So with Ephemeral, if you have that as your default, if you click any links or do anything, it's going to open it in the always incognito Ephemeral, and then if you need to, you can always open it in your main browser afterward. So in my experience, I kind of see it as more being a gateway slash safety net, which does work best when it is set as your private browser if you are very concerned about internet privacy. Now, as a disclaimer, Ephemeral and any browser's incognito or private mode can only do so much. They'll mitigate some tracking, they don't store data, but it cannot stop determined websites, your ISP, governments, any determined third party. It can't stop that. So Cassidy does also recommend to use a VPN for the best protection if it's something that you're extremely concerned about. But for the most part, it is kind of a special purpose browser, but again, if you have it set as your default and you want to at least have a somewhat easy / lazy way of making your internet browsing more private, Ephemeral is a nice way to go. So with that all being said, Ephemeral is developed and primarily focused on Elementary OS, but as it is free and open source software, it is available on GitHub as well for people to build on their own distributions if they so choose. So I, of course, will leave an App Center link as well as a GitHub link in the description below. Make sure to check those out. Make sure to check out the other applications that Cassidy James has made, which you can find via App Center. If you liked this sort of video, and if you have any suggestions for other applications you think I should take a look at and give an overview of, let me know in the comments below. Till next time, this has been Axel. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.